Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean and special guest Jay.
Hey Jay. Well, man.
And today what we're doing is a Tundra brake upgrade for Jay.
Well, man.
And what's a Tundra brake upgrade? Well, what you do is you basically take rotors and calipers from a Tundra truck and put them on your 4Runner, and the end result is you get better braking. Now, what is the usual reason why people do this? Well, 4Runners are kind of notorious for generating a front end shimmy while you're braking, and you feel it in the steering wheel and you feel it in the front end. And some people think that's due to rotors are actually warping from the heat. Then other people think that it's actually uneven brake deposits being put onto the rotor, causing the rotor to actually sort of kind of warp or be warped because now you had uneven brake deposits on the rotor itself. And I tend to believe the uneven brake deposits is the cause, not the actual rotor physically warping from heat, because you'd have to heat that rotor up super hot to get the metal to actually bend and warp. It's my opinion that it's actual uneven brake deposits, and what causes that is that you'll be braking for a long time, maybe going down a steep grade, and then the rotors get super hot and then you come to a stop, and the brake pads kind of make an imprint of brake material in that spot because they're kind of, you know, singeing right onto those brake pads, and then you get rolling again, and because that area of the rotor had that extra brake deposit, now there's an uneven area there, and then you repeat that on different stops and you could see how the thing happens. How do you fix that? Well, you can either get new rotors, or you can take them to an auto shop or a machine shop and you get your rotors resurfaced. They take a little bit of material off with a milling machine, and then you have a nice smooth even surface again. The real benefit of this Tundra brake upgrade is mainly to increase the stopping power. A lot of people believe that Toyota put underpowered brakes on these Toyota 4Runners, and going to the bigger, thicker rotor that the Tundra trucks have, and also the bigger caliper, it's going to give you increased stopping power. The bigger caliper, the benefit of that is that it gives you a higher fluid capacity and a bigger brake pad which contacts the rotor, and so that's going to give you increased stopping power. Reasons why you're going to do this upgrade is, one, the bigger rotor that the Tundra brake setup offers is that you're going to have greater heat dissipation. That bigger, thicker rotor is going to dissipate more heat, and you're going to have a less chance of having brake fade if you're going down steep grades or you're towing with a lot of weight and you're heating up your brakes, so you will have less chance of brake fade. The second thing is the caliper is larger and has a larger fluid capacity, and it accepts a larger brake pad. So that increased fluid capacity and increased size of brake pad is going to give you stronger braking. Now there's two choices with this Tundra brake upgrade. You can go with the 199 millimeter caliper, and you can go with the 231 millimeter caliper. The 13WL is the 231 millimeter caliper, and the 13WE is the 199 millimeter caliper. Now the benefits of each of these: the 231 millimeter benefit over the 199 is it's a larger caliper than the 199, so it's going to have a higher fluid capacity, and it also accepts a bigger brake pad. The 199 millimeter caliper benefit over the 231 is that that smaller 199 millimeter caliper will fit under all of the stock Toyota 4Runner 16-inch rims. The 231 won't. It only fits underneath a handful of them. With the 231, you're going to have to maybe get different rims, or you have to go through a grinding procedure. We have to grind the inside of your rims out, or you have to grind the caliper itself, which either of those options I don't think is a great option. It's better to just get a different set of rims. So some important considerations before doing this to think about. Number one, with a 231 millimeter caliper option, you might have to change your rims. Those are a big caliper and they might not fit over your stock rims, so you might have to get different wheels. There's a whole long list of wheels that will work, and I'm going to give you a link in the video description that's going to have a link to this guy where he did a very great write-up on this whole upgrade, and he goes into a list of all the different rims that will work with this job, so I'm not going to go into it here. There's another way to address the fitting the larger caliper over the stock wheels, and some people choose wheel spacers. But the problem with wheel spacers is that it can cause some issues with additional wear on your wheel bearings and other issues. And I'm going to give you a link to a good video that Engineering Explained did, and explains all the issues with going with wheel spacers in order for those bigger calipers to fit over your stock wheels. Now the other issue is that if you go with this 231 millimeter caliper option, you have to think about a flat tire scenario. Is your spare tire going to fit over that 231 millimeter caliper? If not, if you get a front wheel flat, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take one of your rear wheels off, move it to the front where you have the flat, and then you're going to have to take your spare and put it in the rear. So that's another consideration to think about, that you might want to get a spare that just fits over the 231 millimeter caliper right away, so you don't have to change two tires if you get a front wheel flat. After you're done with the job, some people believe that it's best to bed the brakes in, and the bedding procedure is a little involved, where you have to go really fast, do hard braking over and over again till you really heat up the brakes, and you put an even deposit of brake material on those rotors. Is it 100% necessary to bed in the brakes? I'm not sure, but the link that I provide to that great write-up on this job also has an area where it describes that bedding in procedure that you can follow if you choose to do that. Now the parts for this job, a lot of times people buy aftermarket parts to save money. Some people choose to buy the higher quality Toyota rotors and the brake pads and the shim kit, and then choose to save money in the caliper department, where they'll maybe buy aftermarket calipers from a place like Napa, because the OEM calipers from Toyota are really expensive. They're like $320 a piece, and that's from an online seller like Camelback Toyota. So in the description, we're going to give you some part numbers that you can follow, but you could also choose to go 100% aftermarket. You could buy all these parts on auto parts seller like Napa or AutoZone. And basically what you tell them is you're looking for brake parts for a 2005 Toyota Tundra 4-wheel drive V8. And you could also get these brake parts for a Sequoia, but I'm just giving you that. If you just stick with the 2005 Toyota Tundra 4x4 V8, you'll get the right parts for this job. You could also choose to buy used calipers from either a junkyard or maybe someone online like Craigslist, and you could buy a rebuild kit and rebuild those calipers to get them up to snuff. So we're going to give you a part number for that rebuild kit also, because that's what actually Sean did with his. He bought used Sequoia calipers and rebuilt his to get them up to snuff. So that's pretty much it. We're going to get started on this job, and hey, Paul.
Nice to meet you guys. You guys are so official.
Now we're gonna torque spec wise, this is really light on torque specs. All you gotta know is that the wheel lug nuts are torqued to 85 and the caliper bolts are torqued to 90. So that's easy. The steps we're gonna do for this modification. First of all, we got the parking brake on. We got one of the rear wheels chalked fore and aft. We used a hydraulic jack. We raised up the front end, and we've got the frame supported on 6-ton jack stands. We're gonna remove both the front wheels. We're going to clamp off the brake line with this special clamping tool. We're going to remove the brake line from the back of the caliper. Once we get that line free, I got these little silicone plugs to decrease any leaking of the brake fluid. I'm going to plug the end of the line with this little silicone plug. We're going to remove the 2 caliper bolts and get the caliper off the vehicle. Next, we're going to get the rotor off. Then we're going to take the new 231 millimeter caliper that we're going to put on Jay's rig, and we're going to hold it up there, and we're going to see where we're going to have to cut the dust shield. Because these are bigger calipers, they're not going to fit exactly on this rig, so we have to trim a little bit of the brake dust shield in order for it to make them fit. So we're going to draw a line, maybe with a Sharpie, and we're going to cut it either with a Dremel or maybe a pair of tin snips. Once we get that all nice and cut and grind it away, first we're going to get the rotor on, then we're going to get the new caliper on, and then we're going to take a couple lug nuts and we're going to crank down and just snug them up to where the rotor's flush, and then we're going to spin that rotor to see if we have any rubbing on that dust shield. There is one area that has been said that's going to rub a little bit, so I might have to take my Dremel with a little grinder and grind away a little material. Then we're going to install the brake pad, any shims that maybe Jay has. We're going to reconnect the brake line. We're going to unclamp that brake line so then we can bleed the brakes. So we're going to go through the bleed procedure for the whole truck. We're going to put the wheels back on, torque everything down, and we'll be done. The last thing you want to do is don't forget to test drive it in like some slow streets, like maybe residential streets. Do some brake checks just to make sure your brakes are working properly, not pulling left or right, and you got good brake power. All right, we're going to get started. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just clamp off this brake line a little bit to reduce the amount that's going to come out when I disconnect it from right here, from the back of the caliper. And then I'm going to use a little silicone plug to plug that. So these are just a ratcheting type of thing to crimp off hoses, and it just does like that. So I'm just going to ratchet down on this, and it holds it in place. The ratcheting mechanism holds it in place. So that's hopefully closed off pretty good. Now I'm going to undo this connection on the back of the caliper and plug it. So I bought this kit of high temp masking plugs or whatever. They work good for plugging off the brake line so you lose a bunch of fluid. So this little jobber right here, little black one, I think is going to be the right one. We'll see. So the wrench, the ideal wrench to work on brake line tubing type of lines are flare nut wrench. It gets a good connection on more sides of the nut than if you just use a regular open end wrench like this. So lefty loosey, righty tighty. A little bit's coming out, huh? Okay, let me get a rag. And you're going to get fluid leaking out. There's no getting around that because you're clamping above this metal line, so you're going to get fluid leaking out regardless of what you do. We're just trying to limit the loss. We don't want all the brake fluid leaking out, and so it'll just require a lot less brake fluid. There we go. So you see the hole? See the hole? And you stick it in the hole. Is that going to work good as a plug, or need something smaller? Maybe a smaller one. I think the pink one will be better. The black one's not the best. Let's see this one. Oh yeah, that's better. So in that kit that I referenced, the little pink one is the best one to go. Yep, okay. Now, so what we got is a short 17 millimeter half-inch socket, like about a foot long breaker bar. Let's see if this will break it free. Yeah, no problem. That's top one's loose. We're just taking the two bolts that hold the caliper onto the knuckle. Okay, and that's loose. Get my half-inch ratchet. This bent metal brake line will be in your way. You just pull on a little bit, get it out of your way. Let's get that other one loose. Now these calipers are heavy, so when you're taking the second bolt out, support this thing with your hand so it doesn't drop and land on the ground hard or on yourself hard. Okay. All right, there's one caliper off. See, is this going to pull off? No, of course not. Okay, so caliper is off. You can see me tugging on this. The rotor's kind of stuck on there, so we're going to take our little plastic mallet and we're going to pound on this a little bit to try to break it free. There we go. That's off. So just pound on a little bit, break it free, because it kind of gets stuck on the axle here, so on the flange. So it's good to maybe clean this up a little bit. Some people put a little bit of anti-seize or something so you prevent that from getting stuck, but you saw a couple whacks. I would say people in the rust belt of the country are probably going to have a lot more issues with getting their rotors to break free. All right, so now the rotor's off. Now we got to get your calipers out and figure out where we're going to cut. So these are the areas where we're going to be trimming. We're going to fit the new caliper, the bigger caliper, and we're going to have to trim material like right in this area and then right down here. We got to trim the material so the bigger caliper could fit on there right. Let's see what Jay bought for his truck. So these are all the parts that Jay bought for this upgrade. There's a lot of different options you can do for this. A lot of different calipers you can buy from different auto parts stores. You can always go OEM, but and whatever. So there's a lot of different options.
Okay, so basically bought some EBC slotted rotors. The reason why I went with these versus OEMs was because from what I read that they're supposed to dissipate the heat much better. Plus the casting on it doesn't look bad at all. If you take a look here, it's pretty clean. Unlike if you were to go to O'Reilly's or Napa. And then for the brake pads, I also went with EBC green stuff pads. But I went with these because, you know, from what I read, they're really good for braking power. And EBC recommends that they're paired with the brake pads and the rotors. And then for the calipers, I decided to go with Napa Premium Remans. I solely went for these just because they have a good lifetime warranty. Plus, they're almost, you know, 1/3 cheaper compared to if you went OEM, which is about $400, and I got these for about $100 each.
Right, kind of right there, huh?
Yeah.
So if you're wondering out there in YouTube land what the hell we're doing, we're holding up the new caliper to where we could see where we're going to have to trim the dust shield. So I'm basically got the caliper kind of lined up with the bolt, just eyeballing it on the front because I can't get it in the back because the dust shield's in the way. So you got to hold it in the front and just kind of line it up with the holes and see about how much you're going to have to trim. So we're going to have to trim out a lot less than I thought, but let's start with that. We'll have to get a marker. You marked it on the back.
Yep. Three in the front, probably yeah.
All right. Yeah. So this is what we got going. We're going to trim that much off the bottom and this much off the top, and then we're going to see how it's fitting. If we have to adjust, this right here is an area where the rotor might rub a little bit, so we might have to trim a little bit off the Tundra rotor, but we're not going to know that until we get the rotor on. The caliper's not going to hit this, but the rotor might. Okay. We're going the Dremel route. I just got a metal cutting disc with a little shield, wear eye protection, and we're gonna go for it. One down. Okay, let's get this one. Okay, we've got two pretty straight cuts. Not bad with the Dremel. We're gonna test fit this and see how well we did with the cutting. I'm gonna get the bolts on. That's starting. Okay. The bottom one. It's just on there loose. Let's just see where we're at. It looks like we did really good on the top. The bottom one needs just a little bit more trimming. You can see it's coming really close to the edge there. So I think I'm just going to take the little grinder accessory on the Dremel and grind that away a little bit. I think we'll be good to go. So now I have just a little grinder accessory for the Dremel.
I just found out too.
If you don't have a Dremel, you can use just a file if you have to do any adjustments. So see how that does. That might be enough. Where are we at? Oh, I didn't really get that much off of it, did I? It's clearing. That's a little too close still. I have to grind more material off. So I'm just taking this to clean up the edges so it's not so sharp. Okay. So I'm choosing to just put a little bit of anti-seize on the bolts. It's probably not going to be an issue for them, but it doesn't hurt to put a little bit of anti-seize on here. Okay. Should we clean this up a little bit? So I'm just going to clean up. I'm just using some brake clean. I'm going to clean up this area where the rotor meets. I'm just going to clean up this area too a little bit. I got a catch pan underneath there so I don't make a mess in the garage. Just going to clean up this surface really good. This stuff, brake clean dries really fast. Okay. So see the difference in my left hand here? This is the original one. This is the bigger Tundra one. So you can see it's thicker. These are thicker. All right, so this is where you get your increased heat dissipation. That's where it's one of the benefits of this upgrade is you get a thicker rotor that can take more heat than this thinner one. So with new rotors, usually come with a protective like oil coating or some type of coating that prevents them from rusting. So we're going to clean them up really good again with some brake clean. Brake clean. Okay. All right. Okay. 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 Bad. Okay. And the other side. Okay. 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 Alrighty. It's as clean as they're gonna get, huh? This thing on. Okay, we're gonna get the new rotor on. Slide that on. Now we're gonna grab a couple of the lugs and see if there's any rubbing. You see, it look like it's gonna rub on there? You are. Okay.
See the dust shield? Back there?
Yeah, this little, it's rubbing there. It is rubbing. Yeah, so we've got the rotor fitted on and we're seeing that it's hitting on this edge right here, so we have to trim some of this off. So I've got a couple lugs in place, kind of just stitched them on by hand, and then we're seeing if it turns, and it's binding. We've noticed that the rotor is rubbing on this part of the dust shield. So I just marked off about like 1 millimeter or 2 of material, and I'm going to use the metal cutting disc on this Dremel again just to cut along it and then clean it up with a little grinder wheel. It's off. binding. I don't know why it's binds. I'm wondering if it's because it's the angle of the CV. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking this little grinder wheel and just cleaning up these edges. We trimmed about 1 millimeter or 2 off of this part of the dust shield. Now I'm just basically getting the sharp edges away. Okay. Now, here. So we just got some Rust-Oleum flat black enamel, and we're gonna clean up these edges with some paint, so limit any rusting on the Jay's dust shield. So we got a piece of cardboard as a backer so we don't get a bunch of overspray.
What size did you go with?
Okay, that's pretty good there. And we're gonna get the backside too. So we got the dust shield painted and cut and painted. We got a couple lug nuts holding the rotor on securely, so now we can fit the caliper over the rotor. Maybe the rotor's not all the way. There we go. The rotor's not all the way on. It's not fitting right. There we go. That's better. So we're just getting these 17 millimeter caliper bolts started by hand. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to cinch these up with this 17 millimeter socket and a 1/2 inch ratchet, but I'm not going to torque them just yet. Now they're snug. Now we'll get the pads in. Now we also need Sim said put the wear tab on the outside so you can see it easier. Mm-hmm. Okay, so take a look at these pads that Jay bought for his truck. See this little doodad right here? That's a wear indicator. So that thing's supposed to squeal and make noise, letting you know that your brake pads are worn all the way down to the plate. It's letting you know, do something about it or you're going to destroy your rotors. So that little tab will squeal before you go metal to metal contact on your rotors and destroy your rotors. So that's what that's for. We're going to put this on the outside. This is going to be the outside pad so you can have an easier way of looking in there how much wear yours. I don't know if that makes a difference, but we're going to put them on the outside. So the pins, these 2 pin holes, go on the top. So you slide one in here like so, and obviously the braking surface faces the rotor. That should be obvious, but there we go. That's in there too. Now we got to get the pins in there and cinch this all down on there. Yeah, see now that's a little bit more loose. The rotor wasn't square. So now there's an even amount of play, so that's better. So you got the pins?
They seem bigger. I guess that's just the red part. I think so.
What I got here, it's brake caliper grease, and I'm gonna lubricate the pins basically in this area right here and here, so they're not gonna cause any resistance and allow the pad free travel, you know, in when you're braking and back out. So I'm gonna lubricate the pins in these areas right here. What do you guys think of that? Is that good method?
Yeah.
This is fighting me. Stop fighting me. Hold that for a second, Sean. Is it stuck on there? There we go. I don't know why. Yeah, I mean it's kind of a tight fit. That's what she said. Okay. There we go. Just got to use a little force. Maybe I'll get a little more grease action on that. Sliding it through the first part, you lose some of it. You lose some of your lubrication. Okay. Just, you got a little clip. You slide in through the hole. Where is that hole? I don't know, I don't see it.
Yeah, you got it, it's right there.
Is it right there?
Yeah.
Find the hole, Tim. Okay. Okay, we got that first one in. We're gonna do a little grease action on this one now. We'll get this bottom one at first, but the spring's supposed to go in. We'll get a little grease there. Put another clip here. Wipe a little grease off there, any excess grease. Okay, so we got to pull this one out and that spring's got to go in. Okay, so we forgot the spring. The spring's important. You have to, in this orientation, there's different types of springs, but on this application, you have this area where the pin's going to go through this part right here. These little tabs are going to rest on top on the brake pads, and then these little hooks are going to go in the hole, I reckon. So got to push the spring in, run it through like so, and then these go in like so. Come on, like that. Looks like it's right. There we go. So now, that's it. Okay. So you got that in YouTube land. Pin, upper pin through the holes of the spring. You got these little tabs that rest on the outside, and then the little hooks go into these holes right here. Now, don't forget to put your little pin back in. There we go. I'm having a hard time finding the hole today. Okay. All right, that's it. You got to connect the brake line. Okay, so the caliper will most likely come with some type of plastic plug. See this thing I just popped out? That's just a plug that protects the threads for the caliper. So I got that out of the way. I'm going to take my little pink jobber out of the way. Just clean that up a little bit. Brake fluid's leaking out. We got to put that sucker in there and then thread it in. This thing's fighting me. You want to make sure that this thing starts by hand. You don't want to force it. So, okay, yeah, that's going. So getting the threads started on this, it's a little bit finicky, but you know, we got them on several turns with our hand, then it started to bind up, and now I'm just putting a light amount of force and it's going in, so I think we're good. You just really want to avoid cross-threading this connection. So as long as you can get it turned a few times. Now, is there a torque spec for this? I don't know, but you can't really, I don't have a type of torque wrench to do that, so just cinch it up fairly snug. It's a small fitting, so it doesn't have to be super tight, okay? I'm calling that good. Okay. All right. We're using the factory service manual as reference, of course. The 2 pages we're using for this Tundra brake upgrade is in the braking section, BR21. It gives you some torque specs, you know, a schematic of how the pads go in with the shims and all that stuff. And then it gives you this torque spec of the caliper bolts, which is 90 foot-pounds. And then it goes through the steps of disconnecting. You disconnect the brake line, and then you can remove the caliper by removing the 2 bolts. Pretty simple. And then you talks about removing these parts, the clips, the pins, the anti-rattle springs, which is the shims, and your 2 pads. So it gives a nice schematic. We're torquing the 2 caliper bolts to 90 foot-pounds. There's 1. And there's 2. Turn the key on, and then start in the right rear, then left rear, right front, left front. So we're ready to bleed the brakes. We're at the right rear. A lot of times you have a little rubber grommet that protects the bleed nipple. You're going to pull that off. Okay, and that's your bleed nipple right here. So we just got to get a regular open-end wrench on there first, and then we can get the bleed tube on there. Okay, here's the setup. You have a small hose that fits snugly over the bleed nipple. It goes down into a container, and I have a small amount of old brake fluid. The tube is actually going under the liquid, so it's submersed in the liquid. The reason for this is you might be worried about getting air bubbles coming back in, so this is a preventative thing. I'm going to have them pump up the brakes, and then they're going to hold. I'm going to open the bleed nipple with a 10mm wrench. I'm going to let fluid come out in any air bubbles, and then I'm going to close it off, and then I'm going to tell him to release the pedal and pump it up again and do it again. So the technique is he pumps up the pedal, holds it. I open the bleed nipple, the pedal's going to sink on him. He's going to hold it there. I'm going to close the bleed nipple, and then we're going to repeat the process. So that's what we're going to do until we get all the air bubbles out of the brake line, and then we're going to move to the left rear. One thing that's important is that you want to be keeping track of where the master cylinder level is while you're doing this. You don't want to go past the point where you've drained the master cylinder, then you get air into your master cylinder, then you got to bleed that. As long as you keep that thing topped off, you're not going to have any problems with your master cylinder getting air in it. This is Jay's truck. He's pumping it up, and then I'm going to open the bleed nipple. Okay, there's fluid coming out. I'm going to close it off. Okay, go ahead and release, Jay. Pump it up again. Okay, hold it. Okay, pump it up again. Okay, I think that's good for that.
But yeah, people get that and they're like, oh, to save gas.
So just cinch it back down, remove your drain tube, and then move on to the left rear. Put your little cap back on. Put the little cap back on. Okay. Okay, Jay, pump it up. Okay, hold. Pump it up. Are we checking the master cylinder?
But no, so I did that. So yeah, I got down.
Is anybody checking it? Where is it at?
It's halfway.
Let's add some. We're just going to top that off, so we want to make sure we don't go too low.
Okay, we're at max.
Okay, cool.
No good yet.
All right.
But hang on.
Oh, yeah. You going to close it?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, go ahead and pump it up, Jay. Okay, hold. Okay, let's call that good. Okay, now we're at the right front. We just did the left rear, now we're at the right front. Hold it. Pump it up. Air bubbles coming out. I don't know if you saw that. Okay, pump it up again. Okay, let's call that good. Pump it up. Hold. Let's check where the master cylinder is. It looks good. It's not low. Okay. How does the brake pedal feel?
Goes at 100.
Don't forget to top off the master cylinder. We're checking the brake pedal now, see how it feels. When you get done with bleeding the brakes, take it for a test drive. Make sure they're working properly. Got a regular party going on here. Check them right here. How's it feel?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay, just go around the neighborhood a little bit, come back, and just we're kind of curious how it feels, okay? All right. All right, so we're done with the job. We had a bunch of guys, other third generation Toyota 4Runner guys out at my house today. We were drinking and talking about trucks and blah, blah, blah. So anyways, the job is done. One thing that I messed up on that gave us a few little problem is that while I was bleeding the brakes, and again, starting with the right rear, going to the left rear, right front, and then left front, we were getting done with that process and his brake was still soft. The right front was dripping some brake fluid. So I didn't tighten that brake line connection to the caliper enough. It needed about a little bit more of a quarter turn, and then it was tighter and it wasn't dripping anymore. So I think we were losing brake pressure from that spot. So then we went through the whole bleed process again, starting with the right rear, then left rear, then right front, then left front, and then his brake pedal felt great. He took it for a test drive on some residential streets around my house, doing a bunch of brake tests or brake checks, and it worked out great. So he's happy with the modification. The reason why you would want to do this Tundra brake upgrade is maybe you're finding that you're constantly getting that shimmy in your front end from braking. Now, whether it's from the actual rotor warping or if it's just uneven brake deposits, from what I've heard from Sean and some other people that have done the Tundra brake upgrade, is they now don't experience that anymore. They're doing the same type of driving, but they're not getting that shimmy. So it's my kind of guess that because the rotor is bigger, it's not generating as much heat because it's dissipating more heat. So maybe you're not getting that uneven brake pad deposits from like heating up the brakes and then coming to a stop and it's imprinting extra brake material where it's like locked onto the rotor for a little bit until you get rolling again. So also, just for the fact that a lot of us believe, including myself, that the stock brakes on the Toyota 4Runner seem to be a little bit underpowered. So by going to that bigger, thicker rotor, which dissipates more heat, so there's less brake fade, and then you've got that much bigger caliper that has a larger fluid capacity, and it also accepts a larger brake pad. So you have more fluid capacity, larger brake pad clamping onto a bigger rotor, you get stronger braking out of it. So it is a little bit expensive, especially if you go with factory parts. But if you do go aftermarket, it's a pretty affordable upgrade if you buy aftermarket rotors and calipers and brake pads. And then you just have to do a little bit of a modification with the brake shield, not a big deal. You either use a pair of tin snips, or if you have a Dremel, you cut it off a little bit, you file a little bit, you know, put the rotor on, see if you're rubbing, maybe trim a little bit more, and you're good to go. You put it all back together, you slap the rotors on, put fresh pads on, and then bleed the brakes and take it for a test drive. I hope you learned something today. I want to thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean, and we'll be back with more videos. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Ah, fuck me. It doesn't fit through. Are we filming? When you get rid, we're using the factory service manual as. Jesus Christ! With this.